Imagine discovering the person you should be able to trust most, your stepmom. Your dad's licensed grief counselor has secretly installed cameras in your bedroom and streamed you sleeping to hundreds of strangers. When you begged your dad to see the truth, he brushed it off saying, "She's the professional, you're just confused." Now her license is revoked, but the scars run deep, your privacy shattered, your family torn apart, and your fight to reclaim your life only just beginning. My stepmom installed cameras in my bedroom for safety, then live-streamed me sleeping to hundreds of strangers. When I begged my dad to believe me, just look at the site himself, he rubbed his temples and said, "She's a licensed therapist, you're just confused." I didn't say a word. That was 4 months ago. This morning she was crying in a courthouse hallway, clutching a revoked medical license. My mom died giving birth to my baby sister. Neither of them made it. I was 17, standing in the hospital hallway when they told us, watching my dad collapse against the wall. 6 months later, he married Patricia, his grief counselor. She moved in with her bright pink throw pillows and her psychology degrees, talking about healthy healing environments while boxing up mom's things. Patricia started her campaign immediately. Teen boys process grief through anger. She'd tell dad over dinner, watching me cut my steak. Dad nodded along, still hollow-eyed, desperate for someone to tell him how to fix us. Within weeks, she'd convinced him I was a ticking time bomb. Statistics show boys who lose their mothers violently often develop aggressive tendencies. She'd say, rubbing his shoulder while I sat right there. The cameras came first. For everyone's protection, Patricia explained, installing them in my bedroom, the hallway, even facing my bathroom door. Dad helped her mount them, avoiding my eyes. Next, she locked up my baseball equipment, my hockey gear, even my old skateboard potential weapons, she called them. My bedroom door lock disappeared overnight. No secrets in a healing household, she'd say. Dad started flinching when I moved too quickly, keeping Patricia between us like a shield. I'd reach for the salt and he'd tense up. I'd walk into a room and he'd find reasons to leave. I started sleeping in my closet to avoid the cameras, using my backpack as a pillow. But I never missed visiting mom's grave on Saturdays. I'd bike 8 miles each way, bringing fresh daisies, her favorites. I'd tell her about Patricia's latest interventions, about how dad looked at me like I was dangerous. Patricia redecorated obsessively, painting every wall bright pink, because color psychology promotes calm in troubled minds. She threw out mom's reading chair, her recipe booksy, and the quilt grandma made. Holding on to the past prevents healing, she'd say, replacing everything with her modern, sterile furniture. Patricia monitored everything: my phone, my laptop, my school emails. She'd read my texts aloud at dinner, analyzing them for concerning patterns. When I complained, she'd touch dad's arm and remind him about teenage male volatility statistics. I helped her redecorate, carried her boxers, smiled when she introduced me as her special project to her colleagues. I played the grateful stepson while dying inside, because fighting back would only prove her point. Senior year, I applied to mom's alma mater in secret, using the school library computers. When the acceptance letter arrived, Patricia got to it first. That night at dinner, she placed it on the table like evidence. College would be too stressful, she announced. Environmental changes can trigger violent episodes in at-risk youth. Dad stared at his plate. "What do you think?" I asked him directly. He glanced at Patricia. "Patricia knows best. She's the professional." She smiled, tearing my acceptance letter in half. "We'll look into online programs, more structured, safer." I broke that night. My friend Craig found me at the park late, on the swings where mom used to push me. He took me to his house, let me crash on his couch. The next day, everything shattered. Craig pulled me aside after school, his face pale. "Dude, you need to see this." He showed me his phone, a website with videos of me in my room, clothes, sleeping time stamped from Patricia's cameras. The site was subscription-based, with hundreds of paying viewers, live stream schedules, comment sections full of requests. I threw up in Craig's bathroom. We decided to break into my old home and find more evidence against her, then go to the police. Patricia's laptop history showed she'd been posting the videos for months. Her psychology notes were actually fantasy scenarios viewers requested. Troubled teen strips down after nightmare. Angry boy works out shirtless. Each video titled like case studies. I couldn't go home, couldn't warn dad without alerting Patricia. She knew I'd discovered the site. She'd delete everything before I could get proof. I stayed with Craig for 3 days, skipping school, trying to figure out what to do. Patricia must have noticed the drop in viewers. She called Dad, spinning her story. He's having an episode classic flight response that could turn aggressive. Then she escalated. Craig's mom got a call from the police. Patricia had reported me as a dangerous runaway with violent tendencies, claiming I threatened her and needed immediate intervention. The officers who came to Craig's house looked skeptical as I explained, showing them screenshots Craig had saved. They said I could file charges, but Patricia had already taken the videos down, without the actual site. It was my word against a licensed psychologist. If I went home to gather evidence, she'd destroy it. If I stayed away, she'd keep escalating. The officer handed me his card. Document everything you can. We'll need proof. I stood in Craig's driveway watching them leave, knowing Patricia had won. She'd isolated me from my dad, stolen my future, and turned me into a product tan somehow. She'd made it all look like therapy. I sat in Craig's car, staring at the printouts he'd made from Patricia's laptop history. The forum post made my stomach turn. Grief Counselors United. A private discussion board where Patricia shared details about me for months. Clinical language barely disguised the personal information. Subject exhibits typical avoidance patterns. Flight response confirms deterioration as predicted. Craig drove us to the pharmacy while I scrolled through more posts. Patricia was backing up her research files, adding notes about my behavior. The timestamp on her latest entry was from that morning. She documented my absence as evidence of escalating instability. Inside the pharmacy, I headed straight for the prescription counter. Dad's new medication sat waiting in a white paper bag. The pharmacist pulled it down just as Patricia appeared beside me, reaching for the same shelf. She carried a stack of manila folders, labeled with patient numbers. The pharmacist glanced between us. Patricia smiled professionally while I stood frozen. She picked up her own prescription bag. The label was visible for a moment. Anti-anxiety medication, same as Dad's, but a different dosage. His father's prescription, Patricia told the pharmacist. I'm managing his medications now. She showed a laminated card, medical, proxy. The pharmacist nodded and made a note. The dosage has increased quite a bit from last month. Make sure he's not experiencing any confusion or memory issues. Patricia's hand tightened on her folders. Everything's being monitored carefully. The words burst out before I could stop them. She's recording me for her sick research. My voice cracked, garbled with emotion. The pharmacist stepped back. Other customers turned to stare. A teenager yelling at a well-dressed professional woman about privacy. I could see how it looked. Patricia's expression shifted to concern the perfect performance of a worried stepmother. He's having a difficult time, she explained calmly. Grief manifests in many ways. I grabbed Dad's prescription and left, my face burning in the parking lot. Craig was talking on his phone. His mom's voice carried through the speaker. Patricia's blog about parenting through trauma. Her insights about teenage behavior are invaluable, she said. I slumped in the passenger seat. Patricia's influence was spreading beyond my family. Craig ended the call, looking troubled. I have to take you somewhere, I told him. Dad had a doctor's appointment in an hour. Craig hesitated. What about confronting Patricia at her office? Getting actual evidence. The choice felt impossible. Confront her directly and risk her destroying evidence, or check on Dad, who'd been increasingly confused lately. The prescription bag felt heavy in my lap. Patricia had been managing his medications for weeks. His father's health first. I decided at the medical building. I found Dad already in the waiting room. He looked up when I entered, blinking slowly as if trying to focus. His shirt was buttoned wrong. Weren't you at school? He asked, words slightly slurred. Before I could answer, Patricia emerged from the doctor's office, holding a clipboard. She'd arrived before us, already inside discussing Dad's case. The receptionist handed her more forms. I'm listed as his medical proxy now, Patricia announced, not looking at me. Given his cognitive decline from grief, someone needs to make medical decisions. Dad nodded absently, not processing what she'd said. I watched him struggle to sign where Patricia pointed. His signature looked shaky, different from just weeks ago. The doctor called us back. Patricia positioned herself between Dad and me, guiding him with a hand on his elbow. In the examination room, she answered most of the doctor's questions, while Dad sat quietly. He's been forgetting things, Patricia explained, missing time. Confusion about recent events, classic symptoms of grief, induced cognitive impairment. The doctor made notes while examining Dad when he asked Dad about his medications. Patricia produced a typed list from her folder. I've been managing them to ensure compliance. Dad tried to answer a question about his sleep patterns, but got confused halfway through. I reached over to steady him when he swayed slightly. Patricia immediately started documenting on her phone. Please don't agitate him, she said sharply. He becomes disoriented when overwhelmed. The doctor suggested neurological tests. Patricia agreed immediately, already pulling out her calendar to schedule follow-ups. Dad just nodded, trusting her completely. Back in the waiting room, my phone buzzed with messages from 3 different numbers. The school counselor Craig's mom, and an unknown caller. Patricia watched me check the screen, making another note. Craig texted that his parents had found the forum printouts in his room. They wanted to talk to me immediately, another crisis added to the growing list. The school counselor's voicemail was brief but concerning. They needed me to come in for a psychiatric evaluation based on recent behavioral concerns. Patricia's influence was reaching into every corner of my life. Dad dozed off in his chair, while Patricia filled out more forms. I watched her forge his signature on several documents, her handwriting steadier than his had been. She caught me looking and smiled. Your father needs help, she said quietly. I'm the only one providing it. The rage built in my chest, but I forced it down. Any reaction would become evidence in her files. Every emotion I showed got twisted into proof of instability. Craig's mom called again. Patricia had offered to provide pro bono therapy for my escalating condition. The same woman who'd been live streaming my private moments to strangers. The system designed to protect people was being weaponized against me. She's building a case for involuntary commitment, I told Craig. And I've got no credible adult support left. The weight of it crashed down. Patricia controlled Dad's medications, his medical decisions, and his perception of reality. She'd influenced my school, Craig's family, and built a professional network that validated her every move. The forum posts were just one piece of a much larger operation. Craig drove while I stared at the prescription bag. Inside were pills that were supposed to help Dad's anxiety but seemed to be making him worse. Patricia's therapeutic medication management was keeping him docile and confused. What are you going to do? Craig asked. I thought about Mom's grave, the daisies I'd left there last Saturday. She trusted the system too, sought help when she needed it. Patricia had been her counselor for 2 months before she died. The connection felt important, but I couldn't prove anything yet. Patricia's draft articles surfaced in my mind. Therapeutic interventions for violent grief in male adolescents. She was documenting everything for publication, using clinical language to disguise personal details. My life reduced to a case study. The school loomed ahead. The counselor would be waiting with Patricia's assessment, ready to pathologize normal teenage responses to extraordinary manipulation. Each professional convinced they were helping while enabling Patricia's agenda. Drop me at the library instead. I told Craig, I need to research something. If Patricia's building a case against me, I need to build one against her. But I had to be smarter than Mom had been. Whatever she'd discovered about Patricia, she hadn't been able to act on it in time. Now I was racing against the same clock. The forum posts were evidence but not enough. Patricia's control over Dad's medications was concerning, but she had legal documents supporting it. The live streaming was criminal, but the site was gone. I needed something bigger, something that would make professionals question Patricia's motives. Despite her credentials, the Thursday support group met tomorrow. I needed somewhere to sleep tonight. I remembered an old maintenance shed near the cemetery that grounds rarely checked. Walking there, I noticed Patricia's influence spreading further. A neighbor crossed the street when she saw me coming. Parents at the playground pulled their children closer. The shed was musty but dry. I spread out my evidence by phone light, organizing everything chronologically. Patricia's pattern emerged clearly across multiple families, but patterns weren't proof. My phone died around midnight. No charger, no way to track Patricia's escalating posts. Morning brought hunger and stiffness. I walked to a gas station, bought food with my last $20, and noticed my photo on a missing person flyer by the register. Experiencing psychological distress. Contact family immediately. The Thursday support group met in a church basement. I arrived early, watching others filter in. A woman with tired eyes, a man clutching a folder of documents, a couple holding hands tightly, all carrying the same haunted look I saw in my reflection. The facilitator introduced herself as someone who'd lost custody of her daughter to a therapist who documented her into looking unstable. Stories emerged slowly. A therapist who'd convinced a father his grief made him dangerous to his children. A counselor who'd isolated a widow from her support system while managing her medications. Each story different in details, identical in pattern. When my turn came, I showed my evidence. The room grew quiet as I explained the cameras, the live streaming, Patricia's systematic destruction of my life. Several people nodded in recognition. An older man spoke up. His nephew had been Patricia's patient 6 years ago in another state. The boy ended up institutionalized after Patricia documented months of escalating behaviors. The family tried to fight, but lacked resources. The facilitator took notes, explaining that while they couldn't take official action, they maintained a database of complaints. Patricia's name appeared multiple times across different states. She'd surrendered licenses voluntarily before investigations could complete. Then relocated and started again. A woman offered practical advice: document everything but assume Patricia was doing the same. Avoid confrontation that could be twisted into aggression. Focus on protecting Dad rather than exposing Patricia. Courts responded better to protective actions than accusations. The group ended with exchanged contacts and quiet encouragement. I wasn't alone anymore even. If none of us held power within the system. Walking back toward downtown, I decided to check on Dad despite the risk. Patricia would be at her afternoon clients. I could assess how bad his condition had become. The house felt different. Patricia had rearranged furniture again, creating clear sight lines from her office to every room. New cameras blinked in corners. She was preparing for something. Dad sat in the living room staring at nothing. His hands shook as he tried to hold a coffee mug. Empty medication bottles lined the kitchen counter. Patricia's therapeutic management in action. In her office, I discovered something worse. Patricia had been corresponding with Mom's old OBGYN, requesting records for a research project about prenatal anxiety and tragic outcomes. She was trying to posthumously diagnose Mom with conditions that would support her theories. A car door slammed outside. Patricia was home early. I slipped out the back door as she entered through the front, but not before seeing Dad struggle to stand and greet her. She guided him to his chair with practiced care, the perfect image of a devoted wife. That night in the shed, I made a decision. The support group had given me contacts for lawyers who understood therapeutic abuse, journalists who'd covered similar cases, and advocates who worked outside official channels. Patricia's emergency intervention was tomorrow. I had hours to act. I spent the night writing everything down, not emotional appeals, but simple chronological facts, times, dates, documents. Patterns, the kind of evidence that spoke for itself. Dawn brought the sound of sirens, multiple cars heading toward my neighborhood. Patricia had made her move. I reached the house to find police cars outside. Patricia stood on the porch, tears streaming down her face as she explained how I threatened her during a psychotic break. Dad stood behind her, confused and swaying, mumbling agreement to whatever she said. The officers approached carefully. I kept my hands visible, movement slow. One recognized me from the support group. His sister had shared her story yesterday. He couldn't help openly, but he made sure I was processed by the book. No rough handling. No escalation at the station. I asked for my phone call, on a lawyer, but the advocate from the support group. She arrived within an hour with a civil rights attorney specializing in false imprisonment cases. Patricia's emergency commitment petition fell apart quickly. She'd claimed I'd threatened her, but security footage from neighboring houses showed I'd never approached the front door. Her timeline didn't match. The weapons she'd photographed in my room were sports equipment any teenager would own. The attorney had pulled Patricia's history across multiple state-surrendered licenses, sealed complaints, families who'd fled rather than fight pattern, evidence that even protective services couldn't ignore. By afternoon, investigators were taking my statement seriously. The live streaming site had been traced through cached data. Financial records showed Patricia's income from subscriptions. The forum post demonstrated premeditation. Dad's medical evaluation revealed dangerous medication interactions. Patricia had been prescribed the same medication she was giving him, stockpiling her own while overdosing him. The fog was lifting as doctors adjusted his treatment. Patricia's colleagues distanced themselves as evidence mounted. Her carefully built network crumbled when faced with legal scrutiny. Her image couldn't withstand documentation of actual crimes. The commitment hearing became an investigation into Patricia. Her tears seemed genuine as she insisted she'd been helping, that her research would save lives. The delusion ran deep. She truly believed her own narrative. Other families came forward. Benja's family had been waiting for someone else to speak first. Patricia's sister confirmed memory gaps and medication management. The pattern was undeniable. Dad's recovery was slow. Each day brought more clarity but also horror at what he'd enabled. We started family therapy with a carefully vetted counselor who understood trauma and coercive control. Patricia faced multiple charges. The legal process would take months, maybe years. But she'd lost her power to practice, to access vulnerable families, to document children for her twisted research. I returned to school with support services in place. Some people still believed Patricia's narrative, but others recognized the truth. Craig's family apologized, understanding how they'd been manipulated. The support group celebrated quietly, another predator stopped, another family protected. We all knew Patricia wasn't unique. The system that enabled her still existed. I visited Mom's grave with fresh daisies and updates. Her journal had helped build the case. She'd seen through Patricia but hadn't lived to stop her. Now her evidence had protected others. Dad sold the house to many cameras, to many memories. We found a small apartment near his work, starting over with careful trust and ongoing therapy. Patricia's trial revealed the full scope. Dozens of families across 5 states. Years of research that destroyed lives. She maintained she'd been helping even as victims testified. The verdict brought relief, but not celebration. Patricia would serve time and receive mandatory psychiatric treatment. Other families would pursue civil suits. Precedents would be set. I kept attending the support group, sharing my story with new members, carrying familiar pain. We couldn't fix the system, but we could validate each other's experiences. Life continued with permanent changes. Trust came harder. Privacy felt precious. But I'd learned to document everything, to recognize manipulation, to protect myself and others. The cameras were gone, but I still checked corners out of habit. Patricia was locked away, but her influence lingered in small traumas and careful behaviors. Recovery wasn't a destination, but a daily choice. Some days were harder than others, but I was free. Dad was healing, and Patricia's research would never harm another family. That's the real ending, not dramatic justice, but quiet survival. Moving forward with scars but also wisdom, building a life that Patricia had tried to steal. And sometimes on quiet mornings, I brought daisies to Mom's grave and told her we'd won.